What do you think's behind this?
Definitely a portal to another world. Narnia.
Portal with cheaper gas prices?
God, let's go. Sign
All right,
me up. I'm Sarah. I am here today on the Dirt Kings Podcast. I am a soil advisor with AgriTec. We sell liquid fertilizers and liquid calciums, and today we are here to talk about your soil health, soil pH, things that you should be looking for, and things that will be really helpful. I'm joined today by Jonathan Barrett. He is also one of the soil advisors here as well.
I'm Jonathan Barrett. Been working in the industry for about 10 years now. I'm excited to talk to you guys and talk to Sarah here. And so what do we got to talk about today, Sam?
So today we are going to talk about soil health. So about what I should be looking for, what I'm growing, if I'm growing hay, pasture, if that makes a difference. What am I looking at when I look at my dirt, right? And if I go ahead and I get a soil test on that dirt, what am I looking at when I look at a piece of paper with all those numbers across it that make no sense? So tell me a little bit, Jonathan, about if you're going out there to your field, what are you kind of looking for?
Well, first and foremost, I think the important thing is making sure you get an average of your field. If you just take it in one spot, you're really only knowing what that spot contains. So what I like to do when I go out to my field is I like to take 4 or 5 spots, usually towards corners, but not too far towards the corners, in a bit of the ways, and then one smack dab in the middle. That gives me a really good reading of across the field of what the soil has, and it gives me a good average. I mean, I'm not applying differently every 10 feet, so I need to know what the whole field can do so I can spread the same across the whole thing.
That makes sense. So I went out in my field the other day and I was looking at it. Man, it's some field that I just recently got. I don't think that it's been taken care of very well, but the dirt is very hard. It's very compact. I see a lot of weeds. What should I be kind of seeing when I'm going out there when I'm picking up my dirt and I'm looking at it? Like what makes me think that is healthy?
Absolutely. So weeds are definitely a good indicator of pH level, soil nutrients, things like that. Really the weeds to focus on for low pH matter. Your broom sage, thistles, buttercup. They're going to let you know kind of where you're running at on the pH, what you need to look for there. As for soil compaction issues, that can be caused by a couple things. The lower your CEC is, essentially the more sand you have in your soil, the finer the grain is, and actually the more compact your soil can be. So key there is making sure that you're either aerating, applying an aeration product, doing something to get oxygen to the root zone. Really important for the roots to breathe, just like it is for us. And so making sure that the roots get the oxygen that it needs to really thrive will do a lot for your production.
So what you're telling me is if I take a soil test and it comes back and my CEC on my soil test says it's a 3, that I should go ahead and just get out my beach towel and lay out there and enjoy a margarita.
Not necessarily. What I would say is usually low CEC levels is accompanied by low organic matter. That just means you really don't have a lot of good topsoil. So what you want to do is you want to try and establish that topsoil, maybe till in some of your grass, do something to add in some extra organic matter, or you can apply a humic solution or something to really boost that organic matter up, get your CEC levels up. That'll help with a lot of different things. Not only does it help with drainage, it also helps with your microbial bacteria. Your microbes feed off of organic matter. So if you don't have the right food source, your plant's going to have a really hard time.
So when you're talking with someone and they have really low organic matter out there with really sandy soil and they're wanting to use like chicken litter, manure, things like that, what's your kind of opinion on how that adds benefit to my soil? Are there more drawbacks than benefits? What should I look at predominantly to add that organic matter in to create that friendly microbial bacteria and that really healthy soil?
No, absolutely. I think chicken litter is honestly a phenomenal option. Same thing with cattle manure. Pretty much anything you can get there really adds a good amount of organic matter. You're getting a lot of good nutrients with it. The problem that you'll run into with horse manure, with cow manure, or chicken manure is you are getting a lot of P and K. You're leaving out a lot of nitrogen. So what you want to do there is make sure that you're either focusing on the microbial bacteria that you're getting in that to fixate the nitrogen through rainfall, or supplementing some nitrogen on top. So 28, 32, or running a dry 46%. Something to really...
What about our Nitromax?
Or Nitromax.
Our Nitromax is a great product, right?
Yeah. So running say Nitromax, just for example. So Nitromax accompanied with your chicken litter is going to be a great solution there because you're getting a microbial bacteria application in with it to help break down chicken litter or your other manure. It'll help break it down, but also help supplement in that nitrogen. So most analysis that you'll find on chicken litter, just say for example, is going to be like a 40, 60, 60. You're not getting enough nitrogen for hay growth. You're not really getting enough nitrogen for anything. You're getting a lot of P and K. It's a great source as long as you're.
So it'd be really good for legumes. Let's say you were just doing alfalfa.
I wouldn't recommend it for alfalfa. A little bit too much nitrogen. Same thing if you got a little bit too much clover out there and you're not wanting to do any detriment on it. I would stick to something with a little bit lower on the nitrogen scale. But if you are trying to produce. Yes. If you're trying to produce some good Bermuda, fescue, orchard grass, getting that nitrogen content is what's going to get you the yield that you're looking for. The chicken litter and the others are usually a really cheap, great way to supplement in a lot of your fertilizer. But you still need to balance it out with nitrogen.
That makes sense. So if I'm going out there in my field and I'm looking at my soil and let's say I'm doing row crop and so I've got Roundup Ready corn, I don't have any earthworms anymore. And we know people are really starting to talk about nowadays how, friendly microbial bacteria is making a huge difference and that we're kind of killing it off with certain pesticides that we use and we need to start adding that back in. Should I be seeing earthworms and things like that out there? Is that going to help me know if my soil is healthy?
Absolutely. Not only earthworms, beetles, high amounts of fertilizer, it's going to kill your microbial bacteria. High amounts of 2,4-D, Grazon, glyphosate, pretty much anything that you're growing. If you're putting a lot of chemicals out, you got to do something to balance it.
Right.
You got to make sure you're doing more good than you're doing harm to it. And yeah, the weeds, we've got to get rid of them to really make a good crop. But doesn't mean that you can't go back in afterwards. Add something like a prebiotic, probiotic, which, in my opinion, prebiotics definitely could be the better option out of the two. But do something to repair the soil as you're hurting them. So if we can balance it out, you're doing more good than you're doing harm to it.
Let's talk a little bit about soil tests. Where would you recommend getting soil tests from? And what would you, if I am going to go somewhere and get a soil test, and let's say I try my, local state university, what are important things that I need to make sure that they show on that soil test?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've seen hundreds of different lab soil samples throughout my time working in the industry. And I would say my biggest recommendation is make sure they have enough data. As somebody who reads it, if you're getting somebody to read the data that they're giving you, they need to make sure they're telling you levels of every single nutrient. You'll run into it with different facilities that it'll tell you just the pH, or here's your level of NPK, put down this, and then that's it. Well, how am I going to know what my level of sulfur is?
Those are the most frustrating tests for me to sit there and read, because I look at this test, and, and we'll keep talking about it, but your pH is made up of certain nutrients, right? It's made up of potash, it's made up of magnesium, it's made up of calcium. And when I get a soil test back for a guy to look at it and give him recommendations, and it's some university test, and it says nothing but tell me the pH, I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, are you low in calcium? Are you low in magnesium? Do we need more potash? Like, we have 3 options here that could be the issue.
Well, it's like taking your car to a mechanic and they either tell you, hey, this is exactly what's wrong with your car, here's what you need to do to fix it, and here's this. Or they just go, hey, turns out it's messed up.
Right.
We need to do something to fix it. And you're like, well, what is it? I don't know.
That's me when I go in and talk to my husband. I was like, hey, it's shaking, making weird noises. And he goes, well, what kind of weird noises? I'm like, no, I don't know, weird noises. Doesn't really do great on the diagnostic side for me. He gets very irritated.
That's what I usually get when I'm doing soil samples as well.
Yeah, me too.
This is making my brain go.
Doesn't make the noises. My brain goes, my first year here back, it was a couple years ago. I am not kidding you, because we all worked from home at that point. I called him, 15, 20, every time I got a soil test, like 15, 20 times a day. I'd be like, Johnny, I need you to look at a soil test with me. I don't know what it means. And finally, he was like, can you just collect them all and call me at the end of the day and we'll just go through every one, because I don't have time for this. I was like, okay. It was so bad.
As he's playing video games on his couch.
Probably.
Oh, just spring. I was actually busy here.
He's in his wallet.
Oh man, but
Could never keep track of his wallet. Johnny had to put a AirPod tag on his wallet
Yeah,
in order to keep track of it, because Johnny would lose his head if it wasn't attached.
Yeah, I actually lost my wallet 3 days before my wedding. I had to go on my honeymoon without a wallet, and that was interesting.
You're like, oh, honey, I'm so sorry, but I can't pay for dinner tonight.
Oops.
Shoot.
Lost my wallet. I can't laugh, it makes me cough. Blech.
But, yeah, so as in-depth as you can find is what you're looking for. You know, cost definitely comes into it because we're working with a budget.
Right.
You know? And there's different labs that do a phenomenal job. And I would make sure that you're really vetting who you're getting your soil samples from. It'll not only help you, but it'll also help whoever you're working with. And one of my biggest things and my biggest pet peeves is that if a company offers to do soil samples for you, just make sure that they're going to give you the copy afterwards. If they're doing it for free, it's your dirt. You should know what's in it.
Mm-hmm.
They shouldn't keep that from you. I mean, and it's handcuffs on if you can buy from them or not.
Right.
If they're doing it as a service for you, make sure they're giving you a copy afterwards. Because if you decide not to go with them, you got to do the process all over again. You're behind on schedule. But a huge aspect that I always look for to know if it's a good quality soil sample, are they telling me base saturation levels of calcium, magnesium, potassium, and hydrogen? Those are your diagnostic on your card. They're letting you know exactly where you need to be. Without that, you're guessing a lot of times.
Right.
You're guessing a lot of times on how much do I have on hydrogen level. What's causing my low pH?
Right.
Right? Low pH is going to be an imbalance of any nutrient. Right?
But we don't know which nutrient if the test doesn't tell us.
Exactly. And so it's back to that same analogy of going in and they go, hey, something's wrong with your engine. You go, well, what's wrong with my engine? Well, we haven't figured that out yet, but you should figure that out.
Right.
Well, can you tell me what's wrong with my engine? Looking at base saturation levels let you know, hey, okay, I have an imbalance of magnesium, causing a hydrogen problem in my soil. I need magnesium.
Right.
Or, hey, my calcium's way too low. I need to apply calcium to push that hydrogen out. Or, hey, my calcium, my magnesium, everything's looking great, but my potassium, I've let it go over the last couple of years, and that's causing hydrogen levels. So making sure that you have those is going to save you a world of hurt when you're looking at them. But really focusing on a good lab, I'd say will save you a lot of time, it'll save you a lot of money, and not guessing what the problem is, shooting in the dark.
Right.
I mean, spending money on something that you don't need to. There's really no point in doing that.
So tell me a little bit, if I'm looking at the soil test, and we just talked about how important obviously base saturation numbers are, especially from a soil test. What numbers am I looking at? What are my optimal ranges for that potash, for the magnesium, and for the calcium? What ranges should I be seeing on those tests?
So, it does depend on your CEC levels for most nutrients.
Right.
On where you can be at on base saturation levels. But I would say as a general guideline, shooting for 75% saturation level of calcium is ideal. I mean, that's going to feed your plant. That's going to give calcium for cell division, making up the outer layer of the plant cell. That's going to help your fertilizer be absorbed a lot more efficiently. But for the potassium side, you're going to want a lot lower. I'm talking more like 5 to 6%. You don't need that much. It gives you a lot. Just at that 5 to 6%, that's right.
In super sandy soil, I will say you're generally wanting to see more like optimally 2 to 4, just because.
Exactly.
Again, your soil's sandy, you can't hold as much. You have a smaller living room, right? You have a smaller living room, you can't put as much furniture in it. And so your CEC kind of plays off of that a little bit of how big is my little living room. If my CEC is a 3, I have a very tiny living room and I should probably just get a chair. If I have a CEC of 20, I have a very large living room and I can go ahead and get a big screen TV, a wraparound couch, and all my buddies can come over and we can watch the football game.
Well, absolutely. Just like equipment in your barn.
Right.
Do I have a big enough barn for the equipment? Right.
Yes.
You get a bigger barn, you can get more equipment that you need. That's a huge thing to focus on there. Magnesium, same thing. About 8 to 15%. You want a pretty good level for magnesium, but it does depend on CEC level.
Bless you.
Hydrogen, optimally, we'll have no hydrogen in the soil. Hydrogen readings is your pH. pH stands for potential hydrogen. So all your pH is reading is hydrogen levels. The lower we can get those levels, the more balanced your pH is going to be, the more nutrient absorption you're going to have. So really focusing on that. But I think one thing that we have kind of left to the wayside for so many years is sulfur content.
Yeah.
I mean, with the Green New
sulfur
Initiative,
content, it's not coming out of the air anymore like it used to. I mean, I see more soil tests now than ever before that are low in sulfur content and need sulfur.
yeah, absolutely. And it used to be something we could get for free, and
Right.
and now we're having to spend an extra expense on it. But it is important to take a look at, because sulfur is one of the main essential nutrients for growth of any plant. And so making sure you have the right sulfur content, especially nowadays, is a huge thing to pay attention to.
Definitely. So if I do need sulfur, when is the best time for me to apply
it? Depends on the crop.
Yeah.
With hay and pasture, really getting it on early on, so you can get it through the season. I would say for corn, pre-plant would be what I would recommend, and then beans, depends on how you're applying the sulfur for beans.
Right.
Like if you're doing a KTS, then putting it on at flowering stage is phenomenal. If you're not doing a KTS, I'd probably do a pre-plant as well. But really, the form of sulfur and where you can fit it into your program, as long as you're getting it in there and not causing any burn or not causing any issues with it, I think you're in good shape.
Okay, so let's say that I'm looking at my soil test, and let's say that my calcium is sitting at a 53, but my pH is showing it's sitting at a 6.8 because I have a 27% mag content in my soil. And my soil C is not very high, it's just sitting around a 10, so pretty normal.
It goes back to the same thing. It's an imbalance of nutrients, right? So it's about having the right amount of anything. Too much of anything that's good is a bad thing.
Right.
And so you get too much calcium, you get too much potassium, too much magnesium, too much sulfur, too much salt. It's going to be a bad thing. And so what you're seeing there is almost a false reading on your pH. You could have too much potassium and it could show you that your pH is a lot better than it is. You could have too much magnesium. A month ago I saw a soil sample with 70% magnesium saturation.
70%?
70%.
Oh my gosh.
And his
much
calcium
mag.
saturation was only 10. That's complete opposite of where it should be.
So he was probably applying something like dolomitic-lime?
Could have been. Or it was just magnesium pockets.
Huge
But
magnesium.
it showed his pH was at a 6.8
Right.
because his soil was full of nutrients. Too much of one nutrient that he shouldn't have, but full of nutrients. And then yesterday I was looking at a soil sample and his sodium content was at 30%. 30% on sodium.
Oh my gosh.
And I usually never see more than 0.5%. I don't know if he got a sodium pocket in the soil or what he did, but it was fascinating to me because I was like, his soil. Well, it showed that his pH was at like a 5.4, but most of his nutrients weren't where they needed to be. But that sodium content made it show a higher pH because it took up so much room in the soil that there wasn't enough hydrogen in there to actually show you where the pH was going to be. And so really, it's about balancing those nutrients, getting those levels we talked about, and making sure everything's in line.
Right. So let's say if we've got some hay and pasture, if I'm looking at a soil test specifically for hay and pasture, are there nutrients that I should be focusing on being higher to get a good production and a good crop off of?
Well, what I like to focus on is crop removal rates. It's letting you know how much I need to put down to make the crop that I want, right? And so one thing that you'll never be able to focus on a soil sample is nitrogen content. I mean, I can tell you the crop removal rates, and most of the time they'll do that in the little section down below where it says, hey, put on this much fertilizer. But nitrogen can't really be read properly on a soil sample, especially for the amount that you're needing to put on. So say for hay and pasture ground, you need about 40 units of nitrogen for every ton of hay produced. And so making sure that you have that in line is perfect. Potassium, you need about 30 units of potash to make 1 ton of hay. And then phosphorus is a lot lower. It's only going to be about 10%. So
Gotcha. That makes sense. Tell me a little bit if I'm doing corn and bean. I know that there's certain times that more nutrients are important, but if I'm looking at a soil test and everything's lower, but this year I cannot afford to do what I need to do to get this ground in the shape I need to in the economy, what nutrient should I focus on the most?
Well, I would focus a little bit on your pop-up program. The stronger it comes out of the ground, the better off you are. So focus a little bit on your pop-up program. Make sure you still have the nitrogen that you're needing. That's still the most important aspect of making corn. For every unit of nitrogen you put in, you're looking for about a bushel back on return. And so if you are doing corn this year, which I've actually seen is pretty rare. I've only ran into a couple
guys doing it, right?
Yeah.
The corn prices.
Oh man, right into the gutter. Just like
really
fast. gas prices go up, corn prices go down. Always goes the deal. And so, really focusing on nitrogen this year, keeping those levels up. And then I would say for the P and K, focus on the microbes. That way they can break down the unusable P and K that's in your soil already. Feed off of all the money that you put down in the past, right? So you have a mineral mine sitting in the soil of all the nutrients that you put down year after year after year. Tap into those. There's a lot of unusable nutrients. Maybe your pH was too low one year and it got bound up. Maybe it just
not enough organic matter.
Not enough organic matter. So focus on your nitrogen content. And then focus on building up those microbes. It's a way to get through this year and make good bushels at a lower cost to kind of make up for it.
Okay, perfect. Is there anything else about soil tests that you feel like would be important for, your average guy, your average farmer to know?
Focusing on time of year. We have a lot of time in the fall and winter to pull soil samples, and so most of us do. But a lot of things can play a factor in that. Moisture content, soil temperature, depending on where you are, but it can completely throw off your readings. And a lot of people go, well, if the soil temperature is a certain way, but then it warms up.
I know that you went through this recently. You had a guy that had sent you soil tests that were how long apart?
So he took the first ones in October of last year, and then the spring samples last month. And he did no applications in between of NPK. He didn't do any cover crops. He didn't apply any limestone. And surprisingly, there were some areas that we even saw a point difference on the pH.
Because his nutrients the soil wasn't cold, the microbes were moving, everything was going, and so it showed more of a correct reading, I guess you would say.
Yeah, so why are you pulling your soil samples when you're not putting nutrients down?
Right.
When you're not growing anything. And so if you are doing a cover crop, I would say, pull soil samples in the fall. Figure out what you need to do for fall application. But also pull soil samples in the spring, But that guy was actually on grid sampling, so very accurate. He would taking it every 2 acres, really figuring out what he needed to do. And his whole reason for doing it that way was just to see on when he should take his soil samples. But one of the areas went from a 6.4 on the pH up to a 7.4.
Wow.
So
that's a huge jump.
Yeah.
That goes from telling you might need a little bit of something to absolutely nothing.
Exactly. And so he realized, oh man, why am I taking these in the fall? I've done it every year in the fall, and I'm completely throwing off where I need to be. And so now
costing himself more money too, because
way more money. Yeah, because he's applying things he doesn't need in areas that
none of us can afford to spend more money.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not even just about that, but if you have your budget set on something and you don't need it, why not reallocate it to something you could use to make you more money on the back end? And so I think timing is everything. Get in there in March when it's starting to warm up, pull the soil samples. I mean, that's probably the best time to go in.
To go in and take some.
Yeah, gives you enough time for the lab to get them back. Back to which lab to choose. Also try and find a lab that gets you shorter timing.
Right.
Timing's everything, and if you're sitting around for 2 months, waiting for these.
There's one state that I oversee right now that I was talking to some of the guys that were sending their stuff in for testing, and they're 6 months behind right now.
Golly.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's a long time. By that time, my whole growing season's over. Everything's harvested. Everything's done with by the time I'm getting my soil samples back.
You probably took them in November?
Yeah.
November.
Yep.
So 6 months.
Well, if they're taking them now, they're not getting them. Guy? It's a hay guy, and if he's taking it right now, he isn't going to get it back for the whole season.
Yeah, and then he's missed his entire window.
Right.
So, a couple great companies out there that really do a good job. I would focus on those. Usually, independent companies are going to be a lot quicker.
Yeah.
You're paying them to do it, so they're going to be on time. They're going to try and get it out as fast as they can. And really looking for the data. And then, if you don't understand how to read them, find somebody who does.
Right.
And that's not going to hold your feet to the fire, but just find somebody who can tell you, hey, this is what you're needing, this is why you need it, and this is what you need to do to succeed.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing to take from this episode is really figure out, one, where you're getting your soil samples from. Make sure you're taking your soil samples as well. If you're running blind, you're going to spend a lot of money that you really don't need to spend. Another thing is, make sure you're putting down the right nutrients and focusing your money on where it's going to make you the most profitable. We're all doing this for a reason. I mean, most of us do it because we enjoy it. Why else? But also, it's got to be worth it financially and mentally. And so if you focus on the right areas, you'll have a good return on the back end, and it'll make it all worth it.
Really do your soil test. It'll save you a lot of money. It'll tell you what's wrong. We don't go to the doctor and just have them prescribe us a bunch of stuff without taking some blood work. Soil sampling is really similar. You want to figure out exactly what's wrong so that way we can diagnose that problem, take care of it, get you good crops, good yields, and a good return on your investment. So, that $5 to $25 soil test, that's totally worth it.
Soil test is really going to help you narrow it down to make the soil work for you.
But that wraps up this episode of Dirt Kings, and thanks for having me on, Sarah. And,
of course, anytime.
We
will be back next week with another episode to talk with someone else about something else about dirt.